Whiticar family, welcome and thank you for coming to this celebration of the life of George Curtis Whiticar. Did you know that his first name was George? A lot of us didn't. He was just Curt for a long time. A couple of things before we get started. The family would like to hear from all of you. However, limited time permits only those who are listed on the program to speak. So please sign in at the guest sign-in tables if you haven't already. Also, if you have a memory or anything else, a story that you'd like to share and add to the celebration, write it down on one of the memory cards so that it can be included, please. If you didn't pick up a program, they are available at the sign-in desk or flag down one of Laura Kay's grandchildren who are walking around here with extra copies. Also, this would be an excellent time to turn off cell phones.
Good idea.
Refreshments will be served in the tent following this part of the celebration. John Whiticar contacted me a few weeks ago and said that he and his sisters Joanne and Laura Kay were wondering if I would MC a celebration of Curt's life. I told John that I was greatly honored that they would think of me, but I felt that there were many people more qualified than I, and that was well above my pay grade. After all, I only knew Curt for 14 years, 13% of his life. I have had the privilege of reading the book he and Laura Kay wrote that resides on our coffee table, and listening to taped interviews from 1960 of Captain Ad, Curt's father, when he was interviewed. I've also spent time with Curt in his house or on his porch while he painted. Enjoyed going through the many of his 1900 paintings. My Uncle Arnold first introduced me to Curt at the golf course in 2003 when Curt was 92. He played 3 times a week with his gang of 4, usually at the Yacht and Country Club, where he was one of the early developers of the property and the golf course, and a charter member of the club, the only one still playing golf there at that time. I was never on the A team, but got called in as a sub when one of his foursome couldn't make it. At that time, it was obvious that I was outclassed. I would hit a ball a pretty good distance, but it was often in the woods, in the weeds, in the water, or out of bounds. He didn't hit it very far, maybe 125 yards, but it was straight down the center. It was plink, 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 plunk, right in the hole. We always kept our scores, and we would compare later to see who owed who $1 or $2. One day he said, "Dave, you put down a 6 on number 8. That wasn't right. Your first one was in the water. Your second was in the rough on the right. Your third was in the sand on the left. And you 3-putted. That was 7. He could not only keep his own score, but he could keep the score of the other 3 of us in his head. So again, I paid up. His golf bag was full of my dollars. During my several years on the board of directors of the Stewart Sailfish Club, I got to know Curt as a boat builder, a fisherman, and an artist. He was one of the initial creators of the club in the 1930s for the purpose of attracting anglers from the north and their money to Stewart during the Depression. He designed several pins awarded to anglers who caught sailfish. However, he didn't like the killing of the sailfish, so he designed the pin most cherished by the anglers, the release pin. The release pins were awarded to those who caught and released sailfish alive. Curt also painted pictures that the club still awards to the boat's captains who win the annual Stewart Sailfish Club Light Tackle Tournament each December. Curt built his first boat when he was 11 in 1922.
Wow.
By the late 1940s, the company was getting very busy, and his wife Elsa's brother, John Dragseth, who's sitting back here, came to work for them in 1949. In Curt's words, he and his wife Dodie joined us in our work. John was a good and faithful worker and later became vice president of Whiticar Boat Works. Later, their son and Curt's nephew, Jim, became president of Whiticar Boat Works, so I guess he was a good and faithful worker also. John Whiticar joined the company later, and today Jim and John head up Whiticar. At this time, let's call up Jim. He was here a moment ago. Jim? He not only has a full-time job, but is very active in community and civic organizations and well known around South Florida and the Treasure Coast. Thank you.
Hello. As the pamphlet says, I'm Jim Dragseth. I'm Curt Whiticar's nephew. And I'm here because of a letter sent to my parents in the spring of 1949, signed by Elsa and Curt Whiticar. It said, "We're going to start a boat business. Would you like to do this with us? We have fruit in the orchard and fish in the ocean." Dad and Mom arrived in August of 1949. Happened to be 2 weeks before the 49 hurricane. According to my mom, she says the thought of leaving was fleeting as the men were already out in the yard making repairs. The yard crew at that time was Bobby Thompson, John Dragseth, and Curt Whiticar when he wasn't out with a charter. Curt continued in the charter business as there was no income from the boatyard at that time. As a youngster, my first recollection of Curt Whiticar was with a big knife slicing watermelon on the picnic table under the big ficus tree at his house. I've been fortunate to have great mentors through my life and career, and the most influential were my dad, John Dragseth, and Curt Whiticar, my uncle. Curt Whiticar was the Energizer bunny, the rabbit. My dad was the tortoise. Curt led with sheer determination. He was crusty, was driven, could be prickly. He had no tolerance for a slow pace. Employees soldiering around made open season for Curt Whiticar's sarcasm and rebuke. When Curt was lead brush on a paint job, the paint crew knew they were in for a race just to keep up with the wet edge that he set. Curt knew what he wanted and how it was to be done. There was not a lot of time spent analyzing once a job was started. If it does not work, get a bigger hammer. This was in line with the sledgehammer world of commercial fishing that Curt Whiticar came from. Curt Whiticar was also a very sharp businessman. When he did leave the charter fishing business with the Whiticar fleet, he kept his finger on the business. Much to the chagrin of his brother Jack, the fish mount business was not owned by the Whiticar fleet, it was owned by Curt. Jack was generating income for his brother for many years without Curt being on the water at all. Uncle Curt was pretty resourceful and, in a sense, fearless. The railways operated with a simple lever activated to engage a clutch. Our West Railway was doing some hauling work and had a very big schedule, but it would not stay engaged. Curt went to the carpenter shop, fabricated a yoke stick, just the right length to jam between the concrete block of the winch house and the clutch lever, allowed the equipment to operate. Curt was so confident in his modification that he would come out of the winch house, go down and assist with the cleaning of the carriage with full confidence that his stick was going to keep operations going. As most of you know that know Curt, he was pretty set in his own way and opinion. While building Hull 48, Curt said he would not build the hull without symmetric port lights. 2 on each side, 3 on each side. He would not build it 2 on one, 3 on the other. It was quite a challenge because the client we were building for had a similar Curt Whiticar personality. The boat ended up 2 on one side, 3 on the other. I happened to see the client a short time ago, a few months ago, and he recently told me that he came close to pulling the contract more than once because of design disagreements. Through the years, I believe Uncle Curt accepted boatyard change, but did not embrace it. Putting all he had seen in one lifetime, that is very understandable. He never missed an opportunity to question me how our North facility was doing, point out that a suspected soldiering around event was going on, or that a boat had been in the yard too long taking up space. Late last year, he advised me that we should relocate a boat that was up at the front of the yard by the road. It was very inefficient to have it there, he said, because the trades had to walk back and forth to the shop. I explained the reason why it was there. He understood. It generally felt good to have his approval. And I'd like to note that at 105, he still didn't ask me, he told me what was wrong. Every time I walk into the property on Willoughby Creek, I think of Uncle Curt. At times I stand in the Camp Murphy building Uncle Curt reassembled. I look at that old building and wonder if I could have done the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next is Sandra Thurlow. Sandra? Sandra is a Treasure Coast historian and author of the books Stuart on the St. Lucie, Historic Jensen, Home of History, a story about the House of Refuge, Sewell's Point, and many other historic articles and documents. She's also credited with encouraging Curt to make notes, the notes that he and Laura Kay used as they authored Whiticar Waterway Tales.
Hello, I usually don't read, but I just composed this and I read it to my husband. He said, maybe you should read it so you don't go off track. Curt was a local historian's dream. He was history. He lived it. He made it. His family first came to Stuart in 1917 when Curt was only 6 years old. So he was in Stuart when there was only the Florida East Coast Railroad track. There wasn't a bridge over the St. Lucie that was for automobiles. That's early. He was there when the waters were so filled with fish that his father could be confident that he would fill the 1,000-pound fish box in the boat, the used boat he bought from an ailing commercial fisherman in Jensen, without any problem, that he could fill it up when he went out just on a morning. He went to the wooden schoolhouse that was located where our courthouse cultural center is today. And we knew where the schoolhouse was, but Curt drew a picture of it. He showed where the doors were. He showed where even the girls' and boys' privies were. He showed the nearby buildings, so we have a much better understanding of that schoolhouse. And this was totally a Curt Whiticar trait. He would draw it. If you ask him a question, he answered it precisely and often illustrated his explanations, drawing buildings, boats, equipment. He drew aerial views of Stuart and Port Sewell, primitive versions of Google Earth, just from our Curt. After he tried to explain an unhooker to me, the thing a handline fisherman uses to release the fish from the hook, he went over to his workbench at the boat works and made one so I could understand it. Now, how can you do better than that? When I first interviewed Curt in 1986, he was younger than I am now, and he was just retiring from Whiticar Boat Works. He allowed me to borrow photographs so I could make copies, but true to form, on the back of those photographs was all the information, the people, the dates, and everything I needed to know. Also, the Whiticars often hired professional photographers, Art Runke and Earl Dow Rico, to take photographs of the Whiticar boats and of launching and of the display of catches when people would come in and display their catch. So I ended up with the negatives from those in negative form I have when I acquired those negatives from those two photographers. In 2007, I asked Curt to give a program for Stuart Heritage. Then he was only 96, and he quipped that he had 90 years of memories for Stuart. He gave a wonderful program, and people loved it. And he's given so many other programs, as you know. He's given them for the Maritime Museum, which had to fold, unfortunately, the Elliott Museum, the Sailfish Club. People are always enthralled, or were always enthralled with his programs. Curt was a record keeper. He was always making a list. He lists a list of his boats, the list of his cut glass collection. He was always keeping the dates of things. And this was his habit, but let's think of it as a wonderful discipline that he had. And because of this, everything he told us was quite accurate and reliable. In 2006, Curt gave us a painting showing a handline fisherman at dawn. There were 3 fish lines out, 2 on the outriggers, and the lone fisherman was operating the tiller with his leg. So this answered several questions I had, but then I had the nerve to write a thank you note with all of these other questions and requests. When I read the letter to my husband Tom this morning, he says, that is an assignment from hell, because it just had so many questions and requests for illustrations. So I sent my thank you letter with those questions, and then a couple weeks passed, and Laura Kay called me, and she said, well, Dad's been hard at work. He has 70 pages filled now, and I think we have our own book. And so Whiticar Waterway Tales, a personal narrative by G.C. Whiticar, was published in 2007. I have just been rereading Curt's book, and it's so wonderful to have his firsthand illustrated history of our community, the founding of the local charter boat history, sail fishing, Whiticar Boat Works, and details about the Whiticar family. As I said in the book's introduction, encouraging Curt Whiticar to write things down might be the smartest thing I've ever done since I decided to dedicate myself to preserving local history. Thank you.
Following Sandra, is Jim Carey. Jim captained the 1954 Whiticar-built boat, the Sea Lion. He's well known around South Florida as well as around Montauk, New York. Point of interest, Jim fished with Richard Nixon several times while captaining the Sea Lion. I guess I'll let you decide whether that's interesting and important. I thought it was.
Well, he was a great man. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's quite an honor to be able to speak on behalf of Curt. He was a fantastic man. I mean, to think about a guy who was a fisherman, boat builder, designer, the whole bit, and he did everything so great. The Sea Lion was an amazing boat that Curt had built. She had been up and down the coast, I don't know how many times. I ran it for 26 years. I had it from the Yucatan all the way through to the eastern part of Maine. Everywhere I went, somebody would see that boat and recognize that boat and tell me a story about it. Oh yeah, I knew the builder of the boat, or you know, I once fished on this boat or something like that. Nothing but all positive things came out of it. And Curt was quite a legend in boat building, the way he put the boats together, the way he innovated, designed. The boats were narrow. They were good fish raising boats. They were good sea boats. They were really unbelievable boats, and they still are today. I mean, John and Jim have carried on a tradition which is, it's legendary. It's fantastic. And I'm really honored, and I'm going to miss Curt so much because he was such a great guy. Always had some good questions or some input about fishing or the boat or something like that. He was just an unbelievable man. And I think we're all going to miss him. And thank you for letting me speak at Curt's celebration here. Thank you.
Next up is, and I'm going to screw this up, Ansel Marcelin. Most of us know him as Marcel. Originally from Haiti, Marcel moved to Florida and started, I think, in 1992 and worked for Whiticar for 19 years. He was a good friend of the Whiticars. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Selmi Marcelin, but usually they call me Marcel for shortly and make them easy. Because I'm the friendly person, they have a difficulty to call my name. I just say my last name, I take an I-N off and I say Marcel. And that's me I'm speaking today. If you look at in your program, you will see the picture of that man we come and celebrate too. We come and celebrate it, the legacy of that man, Mr. Curt Whiticar. And I know each one of you in here, you feel you miss someone. And it is a special man. Like today, when I'm invited to be here, I say, I will do my best than I can. Mr. Curt Whiticar, when I heard all those words being said, I can see I'm just a little baby, just born, when they're talking about so many years ago. But what I want to say, for a little bit time I spent with Mr. Curt. Mr. Curt was a one man well known in Martin County, across South Florida. You can tell me you living in Martin County or across South Florida don't hear about Mr. Curt Whiticar. Because I've been accepted in a Whiticar family. This is a big privilege I can have. And when I come in and working in that boatyard, Mr. Curt Whiticar said, hey, come here. And I want to go to him to see what he wants, because he's a precious man. Hey, how your people in Haiti doing? Hey, how your family doing? They know I have a large family. How your family doing? What that mean to each one of you here, that show Mr. Curt Whiticar, he's a man of the heart. Men have a heart for people. Men don't know what high, what short you are. He loves people. And we know we're going to mess him. And I talk to myself, I'm not going to cry, but I hurt. Why I'm not going to cry? He lived his life. And his legacy, his show to anybody how to live, how to success. So lucky I am. When he gave me advice, I took those advice, and I've become successful in Matecani. I can say that loud. I'm successful by the idea Mr. Curt gave me. I practice him. But Mr. Curt Whiticar, he's created an atmosphere. If we professional people need the tools to work, like you know, you're working on a computer, you need a good computer. Those one you are mechanic, you need a good tools. But let me tell you this, Whiticar is a good tools if you want success in your life. And what I want to say today, what I say now, I don't have them in a piece of paper. That's when he's a program. What I say now, he's wrote on my heart. I can tell you truly, I love Mr. Curt Whiticar and all his associates. And my time is limited. One thing I can say. Anyone appreciated Whiticar, God bless you. Whiticar, he's a great tool. Thank you.
Tara Darble. Hi, Tara. Hi. Come on up. Tara is Curt's granddaughter, currently married, living in Palm City, and a nurse practitioner.
Yes. 86 years ago, Grandpa the Great was born. Does anybody actually know how many a score is? 47. Good, because it's actually 5 score. I could go on and on about Grandpa's accomplishments. He has so many to choose from that instead I'm going to talk about his personality. I wouldn't say he was always the life of the party. In fact, he would probably just be rather be in his shop or painting on the porch than be at the party. But he would go to family events and dinners because he liked us and because Grandma would not let him stay home. Once at the dinner party, you could safely say he would not be the last to leave. In fact, when he was younger, before he really retired in his mid-90s, that fact might not be correct either. As soon as the last bite of dessert was swallowed, he would turn to Grandma and later to Mom and say, "You ready to go yet?" Later on, we noticed he was more apt to stay after dessert for quite a bit longer. This was, we figured out, because he didn't have 12 or more things to do on his list. But he was a good storyteller. Even though he was a man of more action, he was a good storyteller. And at our wedding, there was proof in that. He could tell you any detail of a story, and he did so at our wedding. Later on, there were so many comments from people. I would have worn something totally different if I knew it was a wedding, or it was a great wedding. But people that didn't know Grandpa would say, "He can talk." And he did. What I'm going to remember the most when Scott and I celebrate our wedding anniversary on February 13th is that Grandpa the Great was there, and he was so happy and proud to be a part of that. So what I'm going to remember the most about Grandpa, and I think everybody else would be his energy and his attitude to just do. And he did.
Tara. I'd like to add one thing that Jim and Tara both brought to mind about Curt's leadership, if you will, I guess. One day, 3 or 4 months ago, the phone rang, and it was Curt. Dave, he said, I have a picture here where I've written on the back of it, to my good friend Dave Mills. Do you know anything about it? He described it, and I replied that it was one I had looked at recently, but didn't remember whether I'd bought it. I'd gotten a different one for sure. We agreed that I'd call him in a day or two, come over to look at it, and maybe we could figure it out together. When I called and asked if it was a good time to come over, he said, never mind, I sold it. I guess he decided not to worry about it. I think everyone knows John Whiticar. Where's John? John? John, Curt's #1 son. Well, okay, his only son. John's vice president of Whiticar Boat Works and one of the key members of the group that founded Indian Riverside Park.
I was going to see if I could do this without my hat. I'm going to try it. Anyhow, in going through a lot of the material, putting things together for today, I found an essay that one of our sons wrote when he was 12 years old. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to embarrass him. But I was going to read this essay because I thought it was pretty cute. It was titled, My Favorite Older Person. Okay. My favorite older person is my grandfather. I love my grandfather because he always takes the time to help me and explain stuff to me. Grandpa was born in 1911 and came to Florida as a young boy. He always worked hard in fishing and later in boat building. I love to hear about the times he had. Grandpa shared his love with everyone in the family. He loves everyone from Grandpa or Grandma to baby Drew. Is Drew here today? No. Anyway, my grandfather has a lot to admire and respect about him. I respect my grandfather for being so active for an 87-year-old. So Dad was 87 at that time. He rides his bike every day, 87, and was playing golf 4 to 5 times a week. I mostly admire him for starting Whiticar Boat Works, and he's a great artist. My grandfather's paintings are also so good that his paintings are in the Maritime Museum. He built the boatyard a long time ago. He heard that they were selling a building as long as you could move them. So he got some men, took it apart, and brought them up here to Stewart. I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit later on. I respect him for always trying to fix things himself. One time he was on the roof trying to fix his sink, and I'm going to explain that too, and fell off the roof. This was in the 80s. He went to the hospital. They didn't find anything wrong with him. Grandpa is my favorite older person because when I was 4, he gave me an antique fire engine to ride in. He always takes time to do all kinds of stuff for me, like looking up information in National Geographic. My grandpa designs boats and his own houses. He also collects cut glass, bowls, and all kinds of stuff. I'm glad I have a kind and smart grandpa. So that was pretty neat. So I'm going to explain a little bit about a couple of things he said in there because it's a little bit confusing. One of the things he said is, he says that if they were selling the building, if you could move them. Well, what that was back after the war. Camp Murphy was an Army base down in what is now Jonathan Dickinson State Park during World War II. An agreement to use the land, and at that time it was private property, so they had an agreement that once the war was over, they had to take all the buildings and take them off. There was a 2-story, over 6,000 square foot building that was used as the base's mess hall. Dad bid on the building and won it for $475. But the condition was he had to have the building down in 30 days. Now this is a big building that's probably as big as that whole area out there. He with 3 other men, a pickup truck, a gin pole, they numbered and marked every part of the building, took it apart and transported it piece by piece to its current location at the boatyard and met the 30-day disposal requirement by 2 days. This became the first building at Whiticar Boat Works around 1948 or 49. and it remains there today as an important asset to the company. The second thing was about Dad falling off the roof. Well, he, here he is, he's in his 80s, he's got a couple of cottages that he's renting out, and the sink clogs up, and he found out that you could climb up on the roof and shove a hose down the sink vent, turn the hose on, and it would loosen up the sink and make it work. Well, he was up there on the roof, and I guess the vent overflowed, the roof got wet, and he slipped and fell off the roof. And we were really worried about him because it was pretty good fall. They took him to the hospital, and like it was said in the essay, they sent him back home and couldn't find anything wrong, but he was sore for quite a while. Dad was also a what me worry kind of guy, and he already cut off part of one of his fingers in a saw accident. He was always doing things that others would see as dangerous on a regular basis, and there are a few other stories and mishaps that will have to wait till another time. Now, I'm going to dovetail on the story that Jim said about the railway and the clutch. The clutch was at times would pop, and the boat would be like halfway up the railway, and all of a sudden it would take off, and it'd hit the water and go all the way across the other side of the creek. So Dad not only was hosing off the railway with the clutch stick in there, he got behind the carriage, behind the boat, washing up underneath the boat and everything. And we were worried to death, and we tried to stop him, but he said everything would be fine. So anyhow, so one day, I'm thinking around 2005, my mother Elsa came over to the boat shop and slipped and fell when she came inside the door, and we couldn't get her up. Turns out that Dad had just cut his finger on the table saw again, right about the same time. So when he came in to check on Elsie, he had a bloody rag wrapped around his finger. They both went to the hospital, even shared the room together. Dad had his finger stitched up, and Mom ended up with a broken arm. If there are two words that I could use to describe my father, it would be determined and accomplished. It seems that when he set his mind to something, it seemed that if he set his mind to it, he could do almost anything. He is accomplished by his wonderful collections that include old tools, antiques, and his paintings. He is accomplished by creating Whiticar Boat Works, which today provides jobs for over 55 people, and built all his beautiful boats. Dad had a good life, and when he went fast, which was released all of us. The one thing that does bother me is that I keep thinking of questions to ask him, and he's not here. And then I realize that our greatest source of information on the past is no longer with us, and then I get sad all over again. I walk by his bench at the shop, which is where he left. Start over again. I walk by his bench at the shop, which was left, and I'm still amazed that Dad was making picture frames right up to 1 week before he died at that spot. What an amazing life. Curt Whiticar is going to be a hard act to follow. And also, Dot and I want to thank everybody for all your support through all this. We had a lot of good friends, and it's been a big help. One other thing is Larkay is next. Dave's going to introduce her, but after Larkay, we have about a 14-minute movie. And I don't know how well we're going to be able to see it, and it's not playing very well. It's kind of jittery, but we're going to give it a try. And then Dave will have his closing remarks. And after that is going to be the food. So thank you very much for coming today.
John, do you like your hat? I thought maybe you were going to let me wear it. Following John is Laura Kay. Laura Kay? Yep. Who, along with Joanne, is one of Curt's daughters and who lived with Curt the last 10 years here in Stewart. Laura fits easily into this family as she's big on boating and sailing and makes jewelry right along by the crystal displays, I expect. And I just learned a little while ago from your boating partner how much boating you've been doing. Very nice.
Again, I'd like to thank everybody again for not only coming today and giving us support, but for all the support that you've given us concerning my father. And we do have tables for you to sign in. If you've got a memory, if something's jogged your memory, please sign one of the memory cards. We're going to put them in a book so that we can enjoy them. Also, just another little side note, when you go through the buffet table, somewhere up there you're going to see a couple bowls of Hershey Kisses. They're up there because every day for lunch, Dad, after he finished his lunch, had one Hershey Kiss for dessert. Okay, one of the characteristics of my dad was his vast knowledge. When I was growing up, he seemed to know everything. And for the last few years, at 7 o'clock at night, if I wasn't in the living room, I would hear, Wheel of Fortune. And that was my cue to go out and sit in the living room. And we watched Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. And every night he amazed me by something he knew. And I would say, Dad, how did you know that? And he would either tell me this big story about how he knew it, or he'd say, I don't know, I just knew. But he knew so much about a variety of things. Another characteristic that sometimes isn't evident, although from what Marcel said it was his courtesy. He really was concerned about actions to others. And Ernie Lyons, some of you that have been here a while remember Ernie Lyons, the editor of the Stewart News. And Ernie and Dad went fishing one day. Dad took him fishing. And they were going out the cut, and all of a sudden Dad cut the motor down so that they were almost completely idling. And Ernie turned and he said, what's wrong, Curt? And Curt said, nothing's wrong. There's a guy in a houseboat over there, and I don't want my weight to disturb him. And he would think about things like that. Also, another thing about my dad was he was very frugal. He loved going to the A&B flea market. And he was recognized by all of the vendors, and he would always try and talk them out of whatever they had at a much reduced price. Then he would come home and show us all his treasures. And we have many treasures. My dad was also very artistic, and that's been mentioned, but I thought I'd elaborate on it just a little bit. I hope you don't mind. But it shows his characteristics of diligence, industriousness, independence, innovativeness, and frugality. Most artists go in, they buy a canvas board, and then they paint their picture, and then they have somebody frame it. Not Dad. I think he enjoyed doing all of this whole process, but it was also much more economical to buy canvas by the roll, because you could buy a whole roll of canvas and get lots of pictures. Now, one problem is nobody locally sells canvas by the roll, so we would have to order it. And he would carefully cut out his canvas. In fact, one day I said, Dad, let me cut that out. And he didn't want to, but he finally agreed. And he said, okay, well, first start on the left because I cut from the right, and that'll leave a better part in the middle, and we can get another picture. And then you want to make sure the length goes this way and the width goes this way, or you'll waste too much canvas. And then make sure the corners are right corners. And since it's going to be a 20 by 24 picture, you cut it exactly 23 by 27. And make sure you cut right along the lines because you don't want to waste canvas. Okay, Dad. So I cut his canvas out. Of course, if you cut your own canvas, you have to make your own stretcher frames. And that's where the little shop, his little workshop over in the boat shop was. And he would take these long boards, 1 by 8 or 1 by 12 boards, but you didn't want 1 by 10 because it was too much waste in a 1 by 10. So I would go to Home Depot and I would go through all their boards to see which one was the straightest and which one had the least knot holes. And then I would load up the boards and go back. And he would cut them, if they were the 1 by 8s, he'd come into 4 strips. I think it was about 1 3/4 width. Then he would make his little cuts, 45-degree angles. He would cut slits in the edges. He would sand them so the edges were not sharp. And then he made the wedges to go in the little slits. And then he'd take all that over to the house. He'd put it all together. He'd get his canvas, wrap it up there, staple it. And now he's ready to paint. So, of course, he didn't use little expensive paint. If you buy as big a tube as you can get, that's more frugal also. So he had about 8 different colors, not the fancy expensive colors, but he mixed all his colors from about 8 colors, which most artists do, I know that. And then he'd finish the picture. Now he had to make the frame. Okay, back over to the shop he'd go. And he really liked things like Pecky Cypress and the Wormy Chestnut, but most of the time he just lately used Cypress because he couldn't get the other. And he knew exactly how to angle it so he'd get the most out of his frame. And he'd cut those, he'd cut little grooves in them, cut his corners, and then sand them, and now he was ready to put his frame together. Oh, and he made a little indentation in the back. Put his frame together, and on his 106th birthday, a friend and I sat there in the shop, and we watched him put a frame together. And he explained the whole process to us, including the little wedges in case something wasn't quite square, and the clamps with the little things that he made to hold the clamps up, and the whole process, and then he put his frame together. He glued it together. When he finished the next day, he'd let it dry overnight, and he'd put some kind of a finish on it. Then he'd take it back to the house, and he'd decorate the little grooves and the paintings to match the picture. Nail the picture in, he'd put the screw eyes in, and then that was for the thread to hang it. He'd put his nameplate on the front, and then he'd take it outside and take a picture of it. He also wrote on every frame the size of the frame, the kind of the wood, the number of the picture, the name of the picture, and any other information that he wrote on the frame, on the back. Then he'd take the picture in the house, and he would draw in his notebook about a 2x3 picture. He would color it in color pencil, describe the picture and the number and all of that, and then he was ready to start another picture. And he did 2 to 3 of these every week, all the way up until just about February this year. And it was pretty amazing to watch. One of the characteristics of my dad that he was kind of missing, and you might have already guessed this, is patience. He did not like to wait on anything. He was always busy, and if he had to wait, it was kind of a problem to him. I was driving him in the car the last few years, and we would come to a stop sign, and it was his self-appointed duty to look to the right. And as soon as he decided we could make it, he'd say, "You can go now." Well, I may or may not think we could go now. So sometimes I wouldn't. And most of the time he'd look at me and he'd say, "You could have made it." So then we'd come to a stoplight, and it would start again. Pretty soon the fingers would drum. Then he'd say, "Sure is a long light." I'd say, "It sure is, Dad." Now I'm sitting there with my hands glued to the steering wheel, my eyes focused on the light, and my foot hovering above the accelerator, because we had kind of developed this little contest. And I would try and hit the accelerator when the light turned before he could say, "You can go now." Every time he'd say that. And if he was sitting here now, I know he'd say, "You've droned on long enough, Laura Kay. These folks have things to do, places to go. They've been sitting here long enough." So I have one more little thing to say. When we were in the hospital, and we were sitting there, and he was kind of trying to doze, but he was a little uncomfortable. And he had one of those little oxygen clips on his hand. And he was kind of dozing a little bit, and then he started going like this, and I thought, he's trying to shake the clip off. And all of a sudden he said, "Oh." And I said, "What, Dad?" And he said, "I thought I had a paintbrush." And a few hours later, I guess he got tired of waiting, and he picked up his paintbrush, and he moved on. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the life of my father, George Curtis Whiticar. Thank you for the lessons learned and the fun times that we had. Thank you for my family, the wonderful family that we have and the extended family. And for the friends that have gathered here and that have been touched by Dad's life and in turn have touched him. So Lord, I ask you to take care of my dad, for yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.